Welcome to a chock-a-block and crazily eclectic episode of Crushed Custard. There's all sorts of interesting stuff on the way today. We've got a random album generator. Numbers were selected by my good friend Alex Copson, who's got a bit of a broken foot at the moment, so everyone needs to wish him well. So he's selected 3 numbers which have generated the albums for today. Plus we've got another visit to the man in the attic later on. We saw the first one of those in the last episode. Now, I didn't get a chance to give him a big build-up because basically he sent me the first video just as I was editing the other one down. I thought, you know what, let's get him in straight away. So we did, and he's back today with another very interesting look at an album from left field. A lot of people may think so. That should be really interesting. And then also today we've got the first edition of Digital Diversion, which will be slotted in between all the action. So let's get on to then with the first of today's random album selections, and it's this one. Jonathan Edwards, the self-titled Jonathan Edwards solo album from 1971. Now, I'm sure quite a lot of people on the same side of the pond as me are probably scratching their heads going, I'm not sure who he is. Everybody in America will know exactly who he is. Massive big hit on this called Sunshine. It's American country, bluegrass, cowboy type music, but it's more than that. It's more folky than cowboy stuff. It's really good, accessible, nice melodies, lovely words, a lovely laid back, relaxing album. It's brilliant. I discovered Jonathan Edwards in probably the mid to late 90s, when at the time I was an antique dealer running antique fairs and promotions, and one of my dealers who rented a pitch off me came to me one day and he said, I've got something for you. And I said, oh, what's that? I was always worried when they said that because it was going to cost me money. He said, I've just bought this record collection. He says, I don't know what to do with it. So we have a look at it for me. You're into that sort of stuff. And I went, yeah, I'll have a look at it. I had a look at it, and anyway, it was hundreds and hundreds of great albums from the 70s. Prog rock stuff, lots of stuff like, I'm trying to think this is where this came from. Lots of the old stuff, you know, King Crimson and Gentle Giant, all that sort of stuff. Lots of whatever. And I said to him, you've got some half decent stuff in there. He says, oh, I ain't bothered about it. He says, I paid X for it. He says, you give me XX for it, and that'll do. And I thought, quite a lot of it I've got. A couple of bits of it, I've got some damp. And at the time, remember, vinyl hadn't had its great resurgence. It was still collectible. I still think some things were still making money, but it wasn't the big money that it is now. But what he wanted for it wasn't a lot, and it was worth it for what I wanted out of it. I thought, what am I going to do with the rest of it? Anyway, I knew this other chap who sold records on the market, and so we went halves on it in the end. And I took out what I wanted out of my collection, and he took the rest and sold it on his market stall, and everyone was a winner. That's how I found Jonathan Edwards. So you never know what's going to creep around the corner. I found this one Jonathan Edwards album, which of course I got for a great deal because I bought a whole collection. The other stuff, because it never really got released over here, did it? Or if it did, not many people bought it. It took me a while to find it. I was going to pay 20, 25 quid an album for the rest of it, but it was worth it. Jonathan Edwards, really good. I'm sure you'll have heard Sunshine. There's some great songs on here. Now, Jonathan Edwards has been playing with the band Sugar Creek prior to signing a solo deal with Capricorn. So the majority of the songs on this debut album were written soon after he left the band. And Jonathan Edwards says, what he used to do, he used to take his guitar, a bottle of wine, wander off into the woods and sit and write songs. Now that is the way to write songs. If you're going to be a songwriter, that's the way to do it. Don't be sitting there with a pencil and a pad all full of angst and whatever. Get yourself a bottle of wine, get yourself a guitar, and wander off out in the woods. That's what I'd do. I might do that tomorrow, except I can't play the guitar, and there aren't any woods anywhere near me. Well, there are, but anyway, you know what I mean. And it's probably going to be still quite cold because it's the winter still. Anyway, you know what I mean. So that's the way that Jonathan Edwards used to write songs. Now, because that's the first track on the album, everybody knows it just gets fucked up in brilliant. Now then, there's some real nice violin playing that leads into Cold Snow, which is another nice little melody to that song. There's another violin solo again by Stuart Shillman. I think all of these songs, they're too short. You just get into them, they finish like 2.5, 3 minutes long. The whole album is only 32 minutes long, both sides. You've got banjos in there on Sweet Maria, which is a track that Jonathan Wood wrote with John Dolce. Then what else have you got? You've got Shanty, as I said earlier on, which is a song which is a real sort of sitting around a campfire trying to sing along sort of song. Emma is the longest track on the album. That's a really, really nice folk song with lots of good guitar work on, not great vocal on that melody that is just absolutely wonderful. Jonathan Edwards plays the harmonica on there, plays a solo on the tracks as well, which is top notch. You got bluegrass, country, folk tint of "Don't Cry Blue." A chap called Richard Edelman on that, and he delivers a great shuffle of a drum beat to support another great harmonica solo and a really infectious vocal. Things get slowed down a little bit with a track called Jessie, which goes back into the folk vein again, and then the end of the album, Train of Glory, is a little bit of a bit faster paced type thing with some sort of like banjo fueled stomping and all sorts. So it's a really good, I don't know what people would call it now. It would be called bluegrass probably years ago. Now people would probably label as folk or Americana or whatever you want to call it, country folk, singer-songwriter, whatever you want to call it. It's a man who took his guitar and a bottle of wine into the woods and came up with a brilliant album. How good's that? Jonathan Edwards, 1971, self-titled album. There you go. Nice gatefold sleeve, first pressing. And that was my introduction to Jonathan Edwards, today's first album. So you never know where you're going to find the next great find, if you like, because I just went to do what was at that time my job, running an antique market fair thing, and this came to me. So there you go. Jonathan Edwards' first album today.
The Man in the Attic.
Hello there, and welcome to another Man in the Attic session for Crushed Custard. Now, as I'd said in my first session, I am a huge Deep Purple fan, and I think you can see just over my shoulder there, shades of Deep Purple, and just over here is Paris 1975. But although they are my favourite band, my all-time favourite albums are not by them. My all-time favourite album has to be Quadrophenia by The Who, and I will perhaps do an overview of that at some point. But one that follows it extremely closely, and perhaps I would say is on a par with it and vies with it, depending on my mood, for first position. Quadrophenia probably edges it because I live in South London, in Battersea, and Quadrophenia was recorded probably about a mile away from my house in the Who's then purpose-built studio, Rampart Studios, which is in an old church hall building on a council estate, literally somewhere over that way from where I live. But and I'm going to go and take a selfie of myself outside because there's a plaque on it and everything. So yeah, I'll do that at some point and do an overview of Quadrophenia, which is just an epic. But following it very closely, and I played this again, and most times I play it on vinyl, is this album, The Lonesome Jubilee by John Mellencamp. I have quite an affection for singer-songwriters, American guys like Mellencamp, like Steve Earle, like John Hyatt. and get a great deal of enjoyment out of them. But this album came out in 1987, and it was at a pivotal moment in my life. I was coming up to 30 that year, and I think I probably bought it just into 1988 when I'd heard the first track, Paper and Fire, on the radio, or seen it on MTV, something like that, and thought, goodness me, I like that. This album's a wonderful mixture of great rock music, great folk music, a tinge of country, soul. It's all in there, and they use acoustic instruments a lot of the time. It rocks. It really does rock, but a lot of acoustic instruments. Fiddle, a great fiddle player, Lisa Germano, and I just love it from start to finish. It's a 10-track album, and it's one of those, as that euphemism goes, it's all killer and no filler. In fact, the weakest track on it is probably Cherry Bomb, and that, I think, was a hit in the States, certainly. But it's lyrically brilliant. It covers lots of subjects, a lot about kind of the working man, themes that affect ordinary people. Paper and Fire, Down and Out in Paradise, another great tune. Check It Out, that was another hit, I think. It certainly was another single. The Real Life, which follows 2 or 3 different characters and how their lives are panning out and how they want their lives to change. We Are the People, Empty Hands, what, you know, I mean, we've got a lot of people now out of work, you know, empty hands, such things. Hard Times for an Honest Man, and don't we know a lot about that at the moment? Rudy Toot Toot, which is the final track, and my all-time favourite on the album, Hot Dogs and Hamburgers. A tale of how the West was really won, according to John Mellencamp. A great album, beautifully recorded. Kenny Aronoff on drums, who was a long-time collaborator with Mellencamp. And a fantastic drummer to boot. Now, I am, or was, a drummer at one point, and if I had to say to an engineer, I want my drums to sound like this, it'd be the drums on this album. Check some of it out on YouTube. Check out particularly Paper and Fire. The snare drum sound is like, oh, just fantastic. In fact, I would like to play this. Bear in mind, you know, I've had a kind of few issues with Bob Ezrin's production of Ian Pacey's drums on the albums that he's done with Deep Purple. Good though they are, I just think the drum sounds a little bit weak. And I would like to say, Bob, this is how a drum kit should sound. Like the one on this album. This album was apparently a huge influence on the Scots band Delamitri. They loved it, hugely influenced by it. And you can see why. Again, I would highly recommend it. If you've never heard it, give it a try. It may just pass you by. I mean, because music's a very subjective kind of thing, and what someone finds, one person finds as a great album and can't do without, other people just go, meh, yeah, isn't anything to me. Again, another one of my favourite albums just here, Bridge of Sighs. Yeah, I love this album dearly, and if I had to keep, say, 10 or 20 records from my entire collection, this would be one of the first two, along with Quadrophenia. It would be that this would be there. Love it from start to finish, have it on vinyl and on CD, and you know, on the strength of this, I collected the rest of Mellencamp's albums. I think he reached his, if you want to say, hey man, it's his artistic peak. I think it was. purely in songwriting terms, and how good the songs were, and how great the tunes were, and how great the playing is. Let's say, it mixes violins, accordions, things like that, into a kind of Stonesy, soul-y, country, folky romp through 10 great tunes. So give it a try if you haven't before. And if there's anything that Martin or any of you would like me to have a look at, if I've got it, I will. But yeah, try this one out. As track number 3 says, check it out. Goodbye again from the man in the attic, and I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon.
Thanks to Steve, the man in the attic, for another great insight to an album from his collection. Now we're going to move on now to the second choice in today's random album generator. This is another one from the 70s, 1976 to be precise. It's a debut album from a female singer-songwriter. Quite a lot of you may not know who she is. One or two of you will. Anybody who was around in the mid-70s listening to the radio a lot, will definitely have musicians who are watching this will certainly know. There you go, Charlie Dore. Charlie Dore's debut album, Where To Now, which features Fear of Flying and Pilot of the Airwaves, which is the track that you'll probably all recognise if you get a listen to it. If I put a link in the description box. So this came out in 1976. It was a debut solo album. It was a debut album, full stop. And it's great. It's one of those albums, as soon as you put it on, you just know that was recorded somewhere between 75 and 78, 79. It's just got that sound to it. It's got that mixture of sort of styles. It's got the pop stuff, but it's got little jazzy breaks in there. It's got the folky bits in there. It's got the rockier bits in there. It's got the light-hearted bits in there. It's a really good album from the 70s. It's a classic example. If you wanted to play somebody an album from 1976 that wasn't sort of like disco or glam rock or whatever, but was a standard sort of album, this will be it. It's great. And it stands up today. It's very listenable. Oh, David a spin this afternoon. It's a really good album. It's great. Now, Charlie Dore recorded another album after this one and then went off to be an actress and got involved in lots of TV sort of things and stage shows and all sorts of stuff, and then has made a bit of a comeback in the last sort of 10 years of making CDs again. But the other thing that she's done is write songs for people. And she's written tons of songs for all sorts of people. I could give you a great big long list of them, but you can go and look them up on Wikipedia or whatever you want to do instead. It's much more fun finding these things out for yourself than me telling you. But what I will tell you is that one of them, Top 10 hit Machinery Easton, co-written by Charlie Dore. #1 single for Jimmy Nail, co-written by Charlie Dore. So there you go. When these people who made these albums in the 70s disappeared, they didn't totally disappear. They just went into other things. That was one of the great things about the 70s. What I say to people, especially if you're a bit younger and you're starting to collect records now, and you're interested in seeing hearing how things develop, when you go to record fairs, when you scroll through Discogs, all that stuff, when you go to the market and you see second-hand record shop, you see an album and it looks like it's in reasonably good nick, and you don't recognise the people who are on it, but it's from the 70s or the early 80s or the late 60s if you're lucky enough to find one in there from that, and it's not going to break the bank. Give it a go, because what used to happen in those days is people used to be allowed to go and make records that they wanted to make. It was almost like nobody minded how much it sort of cost or whatever. There was none of this sort of take 4 years to make an album type thing. If somebody wanted to make an album, somebody said, "Oh, there you go, there's a studio for 2 days. It's cost us 500 quid, go and make a record." And they went in and they did it. And you can pick up some brilliant stuff from that. You have a look on the back as well. You've just got to look and you'll see names that you recognise. Now, Charlie Dore, we're moving slightly off the point, but her second album, I got virtually the whole of Toto on it. So, there you go. this is what happened in those days. People were in recording studios, they'd be recording their album, somebody else would be in there doing one, and somebody would come in and have a listen to see what they were doing, and they go, oh, so-and-so's in there. Oh, do you want to come and sing backing vocals? I want to track on my album. And people did it. And it's great. You can look at the back of album covers and you can find all sorts of people, you find all sorts of things, and just because you might see something, you might see that and think, never heard of her, give it a go, because you'll be surprised. There you go, that's my tip of the day. Don't be put off buying anything because you don't know who they are, especially if it was made in the 70s or the early 80s. It was only later on where it got all different like that, but back in those days, people were given a chance to go out and make a record. If it didn't sell any copies, they probably didn't get to make another one. They might have done. A load of people, you'll look them up if you look them on Discog, who just made one album in the 70s, or just made 2 albums, and then went off and did something totally different. There's some great music out there to find, and it makes your collection much more interesting. So have a go at that if you get the chance. Second album today then, another one well worth a listen, Charlie Dore, part of the Airways, last track ever to be played on Radio Caroline as an illegal radio station, or whatever they were. Part of the Airways, there you go, Radio Caroline, last track. The third and final selection today in the random album generator game. There you go. Have another look at it. You can see, I'm not sure where the camera is. This is again a band that somebody might know. It's obviously we're on CD at the moment. This is a band called Freedom. Now, Freedom were an interesting band that again you may not have heard of, because if you want to buy a copy of this on vinyl, I'd love to get a copy of this on vinyl. £300 minimum for a copy of this on vinyl. So if you've got one of these stashed away somewhere and you need to make yourself a few quid, you'll get £300 for one of these on vinyl with the old Vertigo swirl. So anyway, who are they? Freedom is a band put together by Bobby Harrison and Roy Royer, who both left Procol Harum just after White Shade of Pale. Now, Bobby Harrison was a drummer. He didn't want to be a drummer anymore, he wanted to be a singer. So he decided to leave and form another band called Freedom. Now, the lineup of this band changed so many times over the years. Now, the first album that they ever put out, it sort of, it's a whole story in itself, so it's probably for another video, but basically what it was the soundtrack to a 70s blue movie. They didn't realise that's what it was going to be, I don't think, and it all came out and it had a foreign title, and it got sort of lost or whatever. But I think Angel Air, or one of those 90s CD reissue labels, got on it and reissued it. And then they went on to make what you might call proper albums. And the way that they sort of progress is great, because in the late 60s it's very sort of progressive, psychedelic sort of stuff. By the time you get to this album, which is called Is More Than a Word, Freedom is More Than a Word, it was 1972. And by now, they're almost getting ready to morph into what was going to be Bobby Harrison's next band, which was Snafu. Now, you're starting to get the elements of country rock coming in here a little bit. You've definitely got, you've still got the blues in there, you've still got little jazzy undertones. You've got a cracking version of Going Down on it as well. But you've also got, horns coming into it now as well. You've got some country tinged, sort of western flavoured type stuff in there as well. So it's almost a sort of a morphing between early Freedom and, early Freedom and then early Snafu, because this came out in 72. First Snafu album was 73, so it was the next year. Snafu, they're a band we're bound to come on to at some point, because they're one of my favourite bands as well, from the 70s. Mickey Moody, of course, was in them. That's how I got into them in the first place, and then you end up getting into them, liking Bobby Harrison singing, so then you end up going back and getting into Freedom. So that's how I came across them. But by the time I came across them, the albums were too expensive to buy. They're all an absolute fortune, so I've got them all on CD. I haven't got a single Freedom vinyl, whether any of them have been reissued in those sort of music on vinyl, Back to Black, or all that sort of stuff that they've been doing over the last 10, 15 years? I don't know. Probably not, to be honest, because they're probably not that. They're not a band that all that many people are still aware of, because a lot of people don't realise that Bobby Harrison was, who was the singer on this, was the drummer on White Shade of Pale with sort of Procol Harum. And then, of course, became a singer, they got to Snafu, and Snafu, most people that get to Snafu because of Mickey Moody being in Whitesnake and all that sort of stuff. But this is another one of those. They've all from the 70s, don't they? All the albums. And this is, okay, this one's 72, and it's that fusion of all sorts of some really lovely sort of instrumentally type bits on here, really nice and folky. And then there's a really crunchy version of Going Down as well. A lot of people think this is, depending on where they come from, I think this is the worst or the best of the Freedom albums. There are a couple of albums before this. Freedom at Last was one of them. Similar to the Free at Last title for Free. And then I think the other one was just called Freedom. The first one, as I said, was a soundtrack to a movie, and it's got a foreign title. In fact, why don't I just make a quick edit and get the others out of the cupboard? I'll tell you what they are. Okay, I've got the other Freedom albums out of the cupboard just to tidy up what we were talking about earlier. Now, I was probably a bit mean when I said that the first album was a soundtrack to a blue movie. It wasn't really, but it was what was described as a risque movie. It was critically acclaimed at the Cannes Film Festival, apparently. But there you go. But this is a soundtrack to it. Black on White, it was called. Musically, I've never seen the film, so I don't know what that was about, what that was like. But musically, it's good. It's in mono because that was made for being in a film, wasn't it? So it's all right. It's okay. It's an interesting album to listen to. Then they made, apart from the one we've just seen before that, they made 3 more before that. 2 of them on this disc, Freedom at Last and Through the Years, and the one just called Freedom on that one. So if you see any of these around, they're worth picking up if you like that sort of music. Then Bobby Harrison's got I think he's got a great voice. It's all relative, isn't it? Whether you like a certain band or you don't. But these are a good band. They're a nice sort of typical 70s sort of psychedelic prog band who are starting to veer towards the more folky country stuff in places sometimes. But they're worth picking up. You see them around. They're pretty rare. They're hard to get hold of. They're all on the old Angel Air label, which I think is gone now. They put out some great stuff in the 90s, some stuff that people couldn't get hold of, and things that were just too expensive for your normal person to buy. So there we go then, a bumper edition of Crushed Custard today, with not only the Random Album Generator game, but also with the Man in the Attic. I probably agree we've covered 1 or 2 different styles there, and I'm sure there's at least one of those albums that everybody hasn't heard of. If anybody's heard of all of them, then let me know, because then you've obviously got a pretty good record collection yourself. I'm going to have to keep saying to everybody, please, if you get the opportunity, you have to press all these buttons so we get subscribed to, and you have to say you like us and all that sort of stuff, because then what happens, they put us all up in the search and we get more people coming, and the more people that come, the more things that can happen, and then we can maybe start doing a few more other things as well. We have got some things already lined up for later in the year, and we're also at the moment trying to work out a way we can maybe bring you some live music. I know YouTube don't like it very much when you do that, but we may be able to find a way around that. We're going to have a look and see if we can sort that out in the next couple of months or so. So until the next episode, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.